I need to get this off my chest. There's an asteroid on a collision course with my house. I don't have the time to give you all the details, but I'm the only one who can stop it. But I recently lost the love of my life to a pack of wild boars, and I don't know if I can go on. Oh, no, she's not dead. She just wanted to live outdoors. Said they were her spiritual animal or something. I guess she was bored with me. Intense action check, sadness, sorrow check, jokes on jokes check. Wait, what was this video about? Oh right, drama! More importantly, something that has been bugging me as I read or listen to some talk about dramatic or emotional works lately. My issue is with the use of the term melodrama. Anytime a work of fiction dips its toes into the emotional wells of the human soul, a portion of the consuming collective come armed to the teeth with a 5-syllable sound wave. Melodramatic. Melodrama is almost always used as a pejorative to critique dramatic or emotional media that some feel is too egregious for its own good. Seems reasonable, right? I mean, that's what I use it for. Same for you, right? Here's my problem. This word gets thrown around way too much. Overused just as much as that basket of freshly uncrusted socks next to your bed. There's two fundamental issues with its use in my eyes. One, melodrama isn't an inherently bad thing. It's a form of entertainment and storytelling that can be just as captivating as the next. The term melodrama via the dictionary means a sensational dramatic piece with exaggerated characters and exciting events intended to appeal to the emotions. Let's be honest, a lot of this is pretty broad terminology, which might be why it's so easy to throw this word around. But alas, I think my point still stands. One piece of popcorn theater that you could ascribe to this is the Fast and Furious franchise. Don't think so? A sensational dramatic piece. A band of street punks band together like a family to have thrills, compete, dethrone douchebags, and fight crime. Exaggerated characters and exciting events. Yep, intended to appeal to the emotions. Hey. Seems to me that works. Whether you like it or not, it's a major franchise because it was able to appeal to so many people, giving this exciting, adrenaline-pumping ride while tying in some surprisingly resonant themes of family and freedom. I mean, there are so many people who were brought to tears by the ending of Fast and Furious 7, right? You don't get those reactions for nothing. How about a highly acclaimed anime from our current generation, Anohana? A premise based around a dead childhood friend and a group of teenagers still dealing with the guilt and grief, unable to move on with their lives because of the tragic event, until the ghost of said friend comes back to help them move past it. Look, if you've seen the ending, then you know that this show is the epitome of melodrama. Yet it still doesn't fail to turn us into a broken mass of emotions by the climax. Instead of looking down on it, it was fairly widely embraced as a staple for anime fans, giving us a story and characters that, even with their outlandish elements, are entirely relatable. Yeah, I cried. Don't judge me. That isn't my main point though. So number 2, just read the title of this video. It seems that any time an emotionally resonant scene fails to do just that, resonate emotionally, for a particular few, the easiest cop-out is that it was just too melodramatic for my liking. We have to stop conflating the term with the genre. If your particular interests don't align with us saps over here, that's fine. Everyone has their own tastes and preferences. I expect there's a good portion of fellow animaniacs that just aren't fans of the dramatic or emotional. Maybe they just be relaxing by the campfire or battling a league of villains. Or praying that their mom doesn't walk into the room anytime soon. To each their own. I would still vouch for the correct usage of terms and criticisms here. You know how people stopped using deconstruction for everything that was a bit out of the norm? Let's push melodrama out of the blanket term spotlight as well. When you start separating your personal dislike for the genre, you can start applying this term more accurately. We can use it as a term to criticize forced drama, the kind that heavily appeals to the emotions while ignoring its characters or giving solid motivations characters and reasoning for said drama. That would make sense to me. So let's look at two shows and I'll give my reasoning for why I think one fits its melodramatic label to a T and the other doesn't fit that mold quite so easily. First, let's look at another show by the same writer as Anohana, actually, made a few years prior, Nagi-Asu, A Lull in the Sea, a story about a group of teenagers who live in the sea, but have to go to school on land. They bridge the gap between two societies, the sea and the surface. You follow the show as we get a few interesting characters and an engaging plot over cultural differences, and a whole lot of personal drama. So let's look at the show through the dictionary's definition of melodrama. A sensational, dramatic piece. Four friends have to bridge the divide and deal with deep-seated hatred between two societies, while impending doom awaits the surface by way of a storm. Yeah, right. That works. Exaggerated characters and exciting events. Giant storm, sea people, the whole second half of the season. Check the box. Intended to appeal to emotions. Well, I'd think a story about society's culture and people's struggles would be aiming for that. So, easy enough. But honestly, I'm not a fan of this vague definition, when in actuality, melodrama has been used as an exaggerated state of forced drama. Forced. I think that's the clear distinction. It's whether the piece of media has earned its emotional stance in the moment and over the course of its existence. Or does it feed you drama in the expense of the characters or story? Nagi-Asu does it, in my opinion. Its plot about the conflict between the sea and the surface, between tradition and personal desire, are interesting, well fleshed out, and engaging. The characters, on the other hand, as I stated, the second half of the season is where melodrama becomes the only possible fitting attribute you can ascribe to the show. Where instead of making its interesting plot and the characters' relation to it the focus, it devolves into this clusterfuck of an emotional love I don't even know what shape is appropriate here. Main point is everybody loves everybody who loves everybody else, and it's obnoxious. It's on a scale that is almost unfathomable. The real problem with it though is that only like maybe 3 characters are given reasonable motivation for their affection, and only 1, maybe 2 get dealt with without the character getting utterly decimated in my eyes. Almost every character loves someone for no established reason. And not just that, it's the absurd anime unconditional love, even if we only met a minute ago, which can be endearing when not overblown to such nauseating proportions. So rather than anyone talking about it or resolving anything, we get every fucking character standing around like a whiny sad sack, unable to express their true intentions or being utterly blind to everyone else's. This show honestly takes the trope to a new level. The only redeeming factor is the 2 youngest of the cast that join in on the second half, which comprise the only 2 characters I still like by the time the series conclude, because they're the only ones who buck this awful trend by their own strength and volition. This is melodrama. This superfluous attempt to create intensity and drama, demanding everything to be melancholic, desperate, dreary, but without putting forth the effort to make us believe it. We don't get to relate to these characters because they act like caricatures without ever giving us enough development to supplement that disconnect. Look, oh god, let's move on so I can be positive instead of frustrated at least once in this video. My second example is none other than A Place Further Than the Universe, my anime darling. So it's really no surprise that this is the one I'm gonna defend from the negative melodramatic taxation. A story about another group of 4 high schoolers. This time they're seeking adventure, among other things, so they set off on a trek to Antarctica. Again, let's stick to a format and look at the dictionary's definition on melodrama. A sensational dramatic piece. A group of high schoolers set off on an adventure? Exaggerated characters and events. Each character is relatable, acts with agency, and behaves at least fairly closely to how we do in real life. So I feel like there's a no there. You could argue the setting of going to Antarctica is pretty extreme event to take place. I'd counter that by saying 1, it's really not that absurd, at least by anime or entertainment as a whole's standard. If they were going to like Mars or something, then I'd grant you a little more leeway. 2, the slight absurdity of it is like the whole point of the series, and its themes that play out through the characters like Shirase and Kimari. So maybe we say it straddles the line here. Intended to appeal to the emotions. I'll mimic the last show's comment here. It will probably do just that, but with that being an overall vague thing that's just about every show is trying to accomplish, we instead focus on the arguably truer definition. Is that intended appeal to emotions forced? Well, as you'd expect here, no. It's an easy thing to throw at the show because of its climax of events and emotional storytelling in just about every episode, but in my opinion, it deserves every last one of them. Now, if you want even more context into this show and in-depth reasoning to why this show deserves its drama, then watch my previous video on the show. Nevertheless, Universe is filled with brilliant direction, subtle foreshadowing, and symbolism underneath the surface to guide us to each fulfilling moment of impact. Each character is given their own personality and backstory, while having agency to keep them all entirely relatable and enjoyable to watch. So when we get a rising climax of events throughout the show's run, it sells every one of them spectacularly. Each episode rising in the intensity of its emotions, with the beginning being more lighthearted, joyful, hopeful, while the ending resolves the deeper emotional story threads leading into some genuinely soul-shattering moments. In episode 2, the joy of motion we get from the gang running through the city is sold so well due to beautiful art and animation, amazing directing, and the solid writing that established Kimari's feeling of stagnation and need for a break from it. Episode 8's tackling of the struggles of a journey head-on are only so impactful because of the same important elements and the chemistry the characters have on screen. In episode 12, I mean, who didn't completely break after watching the scene? The build-up and payoff on Shirase's story was one of the most well-crafted of its kind. So to call this forced or melodrama just seems lacking in context. Again, this much emotional weight in the show isn't for everyone. If you're not into crying or laughing or smiling so hard you think you might be in a tiff with Batman every episode, then fine. You won't enjoy this show as much as I did. But calling it melodramatic, forced, undeserving of its emotional chord strikes, that seems unfair to me, and lacking in much real dissection of the show and its merits. But this video isn't about me defending Universe until I die, even though I will. Bring it. It's about this term being misused everywhere. So here's my plea. Take this word and put it on your vocab sidelines. Look for more appropriate terms and criticisms if you're looking to actually review or coherently share your thoughts on something. If you are going to call it off the bench, be sure that it's the play you want to make. Be ready to back it up with actual reasoning. Or try to at least. Just slapping a melodramatic sticker on something isn't enough. Tell me why it doesn't fully deserve its emotional tensions. And do your best to acknowledge the difference between personal subjective preference and objective logical reasoning. Because drama does not equal melodrama.